As we have been doing over the last several weeks, some of the most important voices of India Inc., big and small, will be joining us to give us their perspective on what the government has done so far and the structural reforms that seem on the anvil. Joining me in just a moment from now will be the chairperson of the TVS Group, Venu Srinivasan, the CEO of Tata Steel, TV Narendran, Shrikant Somani, who is the chairperson of Ceramics Limited and the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Council, Jai Panda, Vice President of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General of CII, Sanjay Kapoor, who runs Sona Comstar, another company that works very closely with small and medium enterprises, and Preet Dupar, who's with the management team of IKEA in India. I want to take you through, before I start the conversation, some of the key highlights of what Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said. The focus of the first of 4 press conferences was on micro, small and medium enterprises, really relatively small companies, an effort to ensure that they had extra credit, that the government would guarantee the credit, and that some of the classification norms, which have been a big bone of contention, which kept small companies small, given extra leeway now to grow and yet be classified as MSMEs, so that all the benefits that accrue because you're a small company still continue to accrue to them. Here's what the Finance Minister said. In a moment from now, I'm kickstarting the live and exclusive Big India Today virtual brainstorm.
There is a fund being created for infusing about 50,000 crore as equity into the MSMEs. This will benefit those MSMEs who have the potential and who are viable. So we spoke about those who are standard, we spoke about those who are NPAs and stressed. Now I'm talking about MSMEs who may be doing viable business and who need hand-holding because of the situation thanks to the COVID. So this fund with a corpus of 10,000 crores through mother fund and daughter fund framework will be able to provide the growth potential MSMEs greater support, and this we think will help MSMEs to expand their capacities. A collateral-free automatic loan for MSMEs which is being provided. This will give facility up to 3 lakh crores. 25 crore outstanding for those MSME units for whom 25 crore is the outstanding loan, or 100 crores whose turnover will benefit from this. These loans will have a 4-year tenure, and there will be a moratorium given for 12 months. These are going to be 100% credit guaranteed over as a cover given to banks and NBFCs on principal and interest. So this is going to be available till 31st October 2020. There are no guarantee fees, no fresh collaterals required. So I guess this will benefit 45 lakh units so that they can resume their business activity and also safeguard jobs.
The Prime Minister has said that he will use this crisis and try and turn it into an opportunity by pushing through serious structural reform on land acquisition, on labor laws, on administrative processes to make it easier to manufacture in India. But this is also a time of deep crisis. What are some of the top voices of India Inc. making of what the government has said so far in Nirmala Sitharaman's press conference and in the Prime Minister's address to the nation? Joining me on this broadcast, I want to start by welcoming Venu Srinivasan, chairperson of the TVS Group. TV Narendran is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Tata Steel. Shrikant Somani is the chairperson Ceramics Limited, chairperson of the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Council of CII. Jai Panda in the extreme right corner will represent the Bharatiya Janata Party and give us a sense of the thinking in the government about what is to come. Chairperson of Sona Comstar, works closely with the MSME sector. Preet Dupar is with the management team of IKEA in India, what are international companies making of what's been done so far and whether this will move manufacturing and production into India. So I want to start by asking Venu Srinivasan about what we heard from the finance minister in her press conference and the Prime Minister's larger thrust. We've been hearing opposition voices. They're saying that, this is not enough. The government's got its priorities all wrong. However, we've also seen MSMEs react with some relief, saying that this will give us some elbow room to ensure that we can survive and be standing at the end of this crisis. Venu Srinivasan, what are you making of what we've heard so far?
I think it's a very bold move to support the MSMEs who would otherwise have gone into a cash crunch and folded up. They would not have been able to restart their companies at the end of May after being through such a drought. So this was very essential and it was very bold. The government has backstopped the loans and given them breathing room, elbow room, redefined the size of MSMEs. I think all in all, we must understand MSMEs provide, leaving out the service MSMEs, which have also been now classified as MSME. The manufacturing MSMEs employ 70% of industrial labor and account for more than between 40 and 50% of exports. So it's a very important part of our economy and this is a very big boost for them.
TV Narendran, Tata Steel and several other big companies work closely with the MSMEs in the value chain. What are you making of what the government has said so far in the press conference today and the Prime Minister's larger thrust about trying to push through once-in-a-generation reform?
I think the industry has been asking for it for some time, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister said what he had to say yesterday. And today the Finance Minister has followed through with some specific announcements. For Tata Steel, the MSME sector is a very big customer base as well as a very big vendor base. And I know that they've been struggling quite a bit on liquidity issues, on permissions to open. And I think over the last few days, we've seen that many of them have started getting permissions to open. And today's announcements, I think, address a lot of concerns that they have. I've been speaking to some of them since the Finance Minister's announcements. And I think many of them are extremely happy with what has been announced. They feel that many of their requests have been addressed. And I think it's a good way to start these reforms that the Prime Minister announced yesterday.
Shrikant Somani, you work very closely with the micro, small and medium enterprises sector. One of the concerns that CII had and other industry chambers have had has been that a lot of these companies will simply be crushed under the weight of the pandemic. On the back of what we've heard from the government so far, how many of the companies do you think broadly are likely to make it? To what extent does this provide the kind of stimulus, the kind of support that you were hoping for?
I think it's a very, very bold move indeed and very much appreciated that we've seen that the MSMEs through this COVID crisis have been suffering very badly as far as liquidity is concerned. And many of them, maybe some of them have already gone under, but many of them would have. But this package will definitely give them scope of reviving and surviving. I think it's a very, very welcome step. One wouldn't have expected, but the government has gone beyond the imagination of many of us by giving this package to the MSMEs.
But Chandrajit Banerjee, the naysayers are saying that this doesn't really solve the demand side of the problem. That the key challenge right now is to improve sentiment, instill confidence and to ensure that there is demand. Now, you've given companies extra credit, but will they avail of extra credit facilities given the fact that they'll have to ultimately repay that credit unless they know whether there are people wanting to buy their products, will enough and more companies be wanting to produce? Give me a moment as I... Okay. Go on, Mr. Banerjee.
Hello? Yeah, so there are a few things that we were demanding. We were talking about that needs to come in from as far as the MSME gambit was concerned. Number one, big demand was let the payments to the MSMEs be done. And I think that has been, the finance minister has been very clear to say 45 days by government and PSEs. I think this is in a huge step. This itself makes the MSME a lot more comfortable today. And that's one. Second, if you see this 100% guarantee for 3 lakh crore rupees. That's a great move to take, and I don't see and I don't understand why your naysayers would not also laud this very important liquidity which is being infused in. And on top of that, you are also bringing in that you are giving benefit to the small and medium enterprises. You are incentivizing them to grow for the first time in several years. When you are changing the definition of the small, and there was no incentive for them to grow because you grow out of the benefits that you are giving. Here you are changing the definition of the MSMEs, which really means that they can avail the benefits as they grow.
Okay.
So this and one can really look at. So this really makes it a very comprehensive package for the MSMEs to be. The finance minister mentioned of 6 different things for the MSMEs, and I see that each of those 6 different things to be of very, very, very unique help to the MSMEs, for them to not only be able to navigate through this next 2 quarters, which are going to be difficult, but then to actually start contributing towards the economy very strongly.
Mr. Jay Panda, give us an insight into the thinking in the government. Because the crying image at this moment is of migrants walking home, and everyone's wondering when will a package be announced for them. The government has promised that it will come, but it wasn't in the first tranche, maybe in the other 3 tranches. Why have we started with micro, small and medium enterprises, and why play this out over 4 days? Why couldn't it have been a budget style announcement? One day you lay out all of what you intend to do.
I think first of all that is incorrect what you have just said, because please remember, already 38,000 crores have been paid out, including 1,500 rupees to 21 million construction workers who are registered through the JAM trilogy. Now, these are all the migrants that we are talking about. Of course, there are more, but I'm saying 500 rupees to tens of millions of women, and so on and so forth. A lot has already been done earlier to this that you ought to recognize. I think the big thing is today's announcement was the first tranche of meeting the PM's vision, which he spelled out yesterday, that the total stimulus, including what's already happened and what is now going to be done, to add up to 20 lakh crores, which is a stunning 10% of GDP. Now, that is absolutely really, really bold. Now, what you've been hearing other speakers mention today right now is that this first tranche is bold, and it is. I think it started off on a very, very good wicket. A lot has been done for migrants, will be done more in the coming days, because that's where the purchasing power is hit. And the DBT, the direct benefits transfer to farmers, to migrants, to women, is all going to help boost the economy. But if you think about what's happened today, it's really stunningly bold, and this is only the first tranche. If you just take the 2 biggest items of today's announcements, the 3 lakh crores of government-backed, collateral-free, automated loan disbursement to MSMEs. Now, this is precisely what they were asking for. I've had many video conferences with chambers of commerce and with MSME representatives, and this was a great demand apart from the payment of dues that Chandrajit Banerjee was just mentioning. Now, think about the huge difference that this makes to their viability. This is a much better way of ensuring their ongoing revival and keeping people employed, rather than giving direct employment subsidy. Because if you give an employment subsidy, that's like giving a person fish. But giving them this kind of fiscal help to get the activities revived is like teaching somebody to fish.
No, so can I counter by saying, Mr. Panda, while the intention is noble, we already have seen through the data released by the Centre for Monitoring of Indian Economy that 110 million people have been rendered unemployed just in the month of April. The government already under the National Disaster Management Act has said that it is illegal for companies to be firing employees. We know that that's not being kept in spirit. Many thousands, lakhs of employees have been rendered unemployed, and therefore, what's the guarantee that the companies won't take the benefit of the credit that you're giving them and still go ahead and start firing employees? How do you ensure that?
Let me answer that as follows. Apart from this 3 lakh crores that has been given for loans to be issued, the other very big development is that government procurement for projects up to 200 crores each will now be only domestic Indian tender. This will help these small and medium-sized Indian companies who were not being able to compete. Now, I have had lots of interactions, as I told you, with business people across the country, including small and medium. Their concern is just the opposite of what you just pointed out. Their concern is, will the migrants return soon enough? Because we are getting ready to open the factories. And of course, now with today's announcement, things are going to start buzzing and they will need the labor. Now, if you think that these companies will take the money and they will operate their companies without labor, that's not realistic. And I think that's just unnecessarily being suspicious of business, which is the mindset we should leave behind.
That's good. It's good to hear Netas speak like that. Netas have been saying this for a while. I wish the bureaucracy would also feel and act on that impulse. Trust business, let them do their job. Unfortunately, many in the administrative services don't typically tend to do that. Sanjay Kapoor, as somebody who works closely with the MSME sector, to what extent do you think the fiscal stimulus that's been announced, the credit guarantees that have been given, will help the companies stay alive in the midst of this pandemic?
Rahul, I think, from my perspective, this is a great survival measure. And I think the first step to any budget or any, measures is survival. And what the government has given is very encouraging. In fact, in the Auto Component Manufacturers Association itself, we'll see 40% of our membership move to MSME status, which will really help them in terms of, the government-backed loans. The fund of funds is an excellent way to bring liquidity into companies that find it difficult to find liquidity. I think payment of, government payments to MSMEs in 45 days is an excellent measure. And Jay just mentioned the 200 crore Indian MSMEs for tenders. I think more companies will apply for these tenders. I think this will spur more companies to go for government tenders, whether they be in defense or in other areas. So I think it's a great first step and it's a great measure for survival.
Preet Dupat, let's also hear from an international company like IKEA. What do you think this package and what we've heard so far in terms of the signal on land reform, labor reform, what does that do for a company like IKEA and their investment outlook towards India?
Sure. And I think I'm glad you kind of brought that broader perspective of, as a long-term investor and a large investor that's looking at investment in India. I think what this step is actually very important. I think we've all been waiting for a stimulus. We've all been waiting for a stimulus that actually addresses the most vulnerable. For sure, the first stimulus package that came with cash transfers and foods. I'm also glad to hear Mr. Panda say that this will continue, that there will be more, because for sure there is a need to protect firstly the most vulnerable. And then I think this is a great survival step also for the MSME sector. It's a good step. It will prevent, bankruptcies, introduce liquidity into the system. The revision of the definition of MSMEs is also a good, good step to enable them to scale up. Yeah? And then I think the question then is to say, how do you then move to the next step? How do you then create the confidence in the consumers? How do you create the demand in the hands of the people? Because will the companies avail credit? How will you get business back on track? I think that still is
Okay, let me put that question then to Jay Panda, because that's a good question. Unless the producers have some guarantee that there is demand for people to consume the product that comes out of a factory, will companies want to be availing credit? Because the big thing that everyone's looking out for is confidence and demand creation. What does your government, Mr. Panda, intend to do to try and address the issue of demand, creating demand, ensuring the people feel comfortable, they feel that they'll get their salaries next month, therefore they go out and spend and don't cut back on non-essential expenditure?
I think that's a great question, and that's very, very relevant to the issue that we are discussing. So that is why from Prime Minister Modi downwards, the government's focus right from the beginning had first been on the bottom of the pyramid. I mentioned the 38,000 crores direct transfers. But you remember that entire package a month ago was 1.7 lakh crores, which went entirely to the bottom of the pyramid. Also, the appeals by the government and urging businesses not to lay off people ensured that they still had spending power, they were still getting their salaries. And the government was, in the meantime, working on the package which has today been issued. So there is spending power in the sense that has not been disturbed as much as it would have if the government had not requested firms to not lay off, as well as not made those DBT transfers. Now, when this 3 lakh crore rupees comes up, remember something. Businessmen, entrepreneurs do not take loans to keep that money under the mattress. They take it to put to good use. So there is rural demand has not been hit as badly as one would have worried were these earlier steps not taken. Now you have a concern, correctly so, that how quickly can we get all these things up and running. I think the steps taken today, particularly that 200 crore cap now for no global tenders, is a huge opportunity for MSMEs. This is a blue ocean.
But do you have any numbers on how many such tenders are issued which are less than 200 crores but are global tenders, and now they'll be India only tenders?
I don't have a number yet, but if you just think about it logically, it is bound to be huge, because there are all government projects are not in the thousands of crores. There are lots of medium and small size projects all across the country, and this is something that many MSMEs had been outcompeted. They were just not in the game to contend for it. So I think it's a blue ocean market for them. It's going to make a very big difference.
But let's just step back for a moment and reflect on the fact that we're in the middle of a massive health crisis. There is an invisible, deadly enemy that's lurking in the air. And I want to ask Mr. Narendran on what are your plans and of those in your sector to ensure that, I sense this urge about let's get back to business. We've been locked in for too long, which is great and it's true. But we also have a virus. So how do we get back to work without ensuring, without ending up in a situation where the virus ends up doing a lot of damage and a few weeks later we have to shut shop again?
Yeah, so I think it's important to change the way we lead our lives, whether it's in the factories or in the offices. I think all the factories have already taken steps.
What preparations have you made? How will you try and ensure that Tata Steel doesn't become a COVID hotbed, that you try and follow, get industrial activity up and running, but yet ensure that the infection doesn't spread?
Well, our steel plants have been operating all through the crisis because we are an essential service. And I'm proud to say that in Jamshedpur, for instance, we were COVID-free till 2 days back. And the 2 cases that were reported were people who came from outside the state. So we managed to run the plant with more than 10,000 workers coming in every day without a problem, because there is a discipline, there's a way you get in, there is social distancing, there's masks with everyone, there's sanitization happening. So you can take those precautions. Obviously, you take more time to do things that you took less time for earlier, and you take longer to do the regular stuff. But I think it can be done, it has been done, and so that's demonstrated. And what we've said is in the offices, you come to office only if you have to. You need permission to come to office rather than permission to stay away from office. So we're keeping minimum number of people required inside the plant and having minimum number of people coming to the offices. So I think it can be done. We just need to change the way we look at the work processes. And
Mr. Venu Srinivasan, at this moment, public transport in many places, especially in the red zones, containment areas, not up and running. How much of a challenge is it to get your industries back on track and yet at the same time ensure that this infection doesn't spread? What kind of preparations are you making, Mr. Srinivasan, at the TPS Group?
First is to provide bus transport with proper distancing, put a gap between shifts so that the buses are sanitized before taking the next batch back. We will lose some productivity in the short term, but right now demand is low, and therefore this will be more than adequate to take care of the demand we have. But our request to the Prime Minister and Finance Minister is that we go on and announce further schemes. I think direct benefit transfer to the landless migrant labor should continue for 3 months.
No, but Jai Panda, it's not just to those who've received benefits. The fact, Mr. Panda, is that there are lakhs of people and they are marching from Mumbai, from Delhi, from Surat, from every urban center who haven't received any benefit. You have, in rural India, transferred money into the bank accounts of those who were already identified and they've received money. But what about in the urban areas, the landless laborers, the urban workers who haven't been beneficiaries of any government support so far?
Again, that's not true. Let me point out that one of the most important decisions taken last month was that apart from those who are identified, who was on the PDS, for these 3 months, April, May and June, even those without ration cards will be given rations. Now, this is being implemented by the states, and so it's not true that those who are not on the system have been left out. And the fact is today, the JAM trilogy is nearly universal. There are still maybe 2-3% of the population not covered, but it's nearly universal. Now, apart from the money that has gone to construction workers, which I pointed out, The money that goes to, say, for example, women in the villages, the 500 rupees to each account, or the extra, the Ujjwala gas connections that is being given free during this period under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. It impacts the same set of people and the same problems of having reduced buying power. Now, regarding people trudging home, hopefully that will now not continue for much longer because the trains are being resumed. Large numbers of people have come back to my home state, Odisha. I deal with them all the time. And I think this is a problem that has been rather well managed as far as the pandemic part of it. Now we are shifting gears to manage the economy and have made a very bold start. So let's be a little optimistic.
So you almost seem to be in denial about distress. The fact that there are people who are, when I see some of those images, it makes our hearts cry. We had Sitaram Yechury just before you came on, and he said that 7,500 rupees should be given to those who've been most badly off and ensure that they have some cash to be able to survive. The government at this moment seems to believe it's done a great job and that there is no distress. There is acute distress, and that's a reality, sir.
No, I don't think the government is denying that there's any distress, and I think the kind of attitude that there should not be any impact of the shutdown is unreasonable. It's illogical. The whole world has been affected by this. Every economy in the world has been impacted, and obviously, despite the fact that our pandemic has been managed properly, and the numbers show it, every public health expert in the world is complimenting India. That's the part I was complimenting. There is no doubt that it has had a big impact, and it has impacted the bottom of the pyramid, obviously, more than people like you or me. And that is why lots of these steps have been taken, including releasing millions of tons of food grains to be given to those that do not have ration cards. Now, I do not disagree that more can be done. And as these MSMEs reopen, many of these people, hopefully should be back on the job earlier rather than later. But in terms of what has already been done in delivering help to people who are distressed, don't minimize it. A lot has been done. I agree there is distress and more is being done. I deal with migrants day in and day out. And yes, it is tragic to see migrant labor trudging home, or as happened in Maharashtra, being run over by a train. But hopefully, as I said, now with the trains moving to get them back, and also remember, those migrants who are coming back to their home states are being given 2,000 rupees each in most states to stay in quarantine.
Mr. Banerjee, today's focus was on really small companies, micro, small, medium enterprises. What do you know what's coming later? India Inc. has been saying that you have to take care of us as well, especially the big companies, because they're the ones who give the orders to the micro companies, and if the big companies start shutting down in a while, there'll be a spiral effect. What do you know of what's coming later?
So we have MSMEs today. We have had issues also addressed towards the real estate and the construction sector. Besides, of course, the NBFCs, and the power discoms. I mean, we must remember all of that. But yes, we need to move because it is the immediate urgency was, as you said earlier, for the migrants, for the workers, which was addressed, the MSME sector, the micro sector, that was the second. I think we do need to come to the stress sectors, and there are quite a few extremely strong stress sectors like aviation or the hospitality and so on and so forth. So we would need that to be sort of unshackled as we go along, including very important. But there are still, as I mentioned, and I really keep coming back like a record on this, like the dues, say for instance, which accrue even to the large companies from the governmental good dues and the PSU dues, those need to be cleared to the largest sectors, and especially now in the next few days we will look at the stress sectors to come, and the large sectors, the large companies would also need to be taken care of, because that really unless they are also taken care of, the stress sectors are taken care of, the chain right down onto the SMEs would not be complete.
Okay. So what I'll do right now is I'll take a very quick break. Then I'll just zoom out for a moment and enlarge the scope of this conversation, because one of the key things the Prime Minister spoke about was long-term structural reform. He spoke of land reform, labour reform and administrative reform. Ordinarily, these are fantastic ideas. But some reform like labour reform, is this the right time to do it? Secondly, even if we were to bite the bullet, as it were, and push through these long pending reforms, will they change the investment climate? When there's already excess capacity, will there be more greenfield projects that will come? And all these people are the ones who have to take those decisions on whether they wish to expand their investment. Will they consider doing that if these land labor reforms are pushed through? And right now there is a crisis, therefore we are pushing through on this reform. But what's the guarantee they'll stay later? Will these be permanent reforms or are they short-term reforms? And if they are, for example, in UP, the labor law has been changed only for 3 years. If that's the case, will it ensure that it serves the purpose for which it's meant, that is to bring in investment? Because investors may think, will this reform stay forever or is it just here for a short period? We'll discuss that and more when we come back with part B of this Mega India Inc. virtual brainstorm. I hope you're enjoying this engaging conversation. I'll be back with more on the other side of a quick break. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kanwal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.